This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, March the 5th, 2019. Members, please rise for a moment of pledge of allegiance and a moment of reflection by Supervisor Buchanan. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One of the most important things we do in elected office is that we speak. We literally give voice to the wishes and the concerns of our constituents through the policies and actions that we legislate and enact in this body. We speak to civic groups, we speak to our constituents. And that's why I think it's so important that as elected leaders, that when we are speaking, we think just a little bit harder and give a little bit of an extra voice to those individuals who are often heard the least, no matter how loud they speak. And right now, I would like to uplift a couple of voices from some of those that are considered to be the least in our society, folks who are in our incarceration system. But before I do, I just want everyone in this room to remember one thing. Over the last 40 years, Wisconsin's population has grown by a little over 10%, from 4.5 million to just over 5 million. Yet in that time, our prison incarceration system has increased by over 700%. We are not 700% less safe than 40 years ago. We have not seen a 700% increase in crime. In fact, after we removed lead from gasoline, crime rates actually went down while our incarceration rates went up. So I'd like to read just a couple of statements from individuals who, as we are standing and sitting and deliberating tonight, will be behind bars in Wisconsin. I'm currently a prisoner in the Stanley Correctional Institution, serving a 6-year sentence from Racine County. Since I've had some time to consider why I've made the choices I made, drugs, alcohol, self-destructive behaviors, I've realized these behaviors stem from deeper issues in my past. That's why I turned to poor choices and drug use. I would love to get to the bottom of these issues, but there doesn't seem to be anyone who's interested in helping. As far as I know, the Department of Corrections doesn't have anything available that will address this for me. I want to change. I don't want to be a criminal, but how can I? Another individual. I'm 50 years old. For most of my life, I was a productive individual, working hard and earning degrees in various fields. Since coming to Oshkosh, I received national certification in Braille translations. It's just that I've got a really bad drinking problem. There's one thing you should know about how Wisconsin's prisons deal with alcohol or drug addiction. There are very few programs available for newer inmates in terms of treatment. Their system generally doesn't allow access to treatment until the tail end of someone's sentence. In other words, punishment first, and if there's time left, you might get your treatment. Another one, I just got sentenced to probation for drug possession and theft. I got a total of 4 years, 7 months, and 9 days. The offense I did were nonviolent and never given an alternative, but I was never given an alternative to revocation. I feel I should have a chance to get out for treatment or some type of program. Confinement is not always the right solution. I will be away from my kids for a long time for a nonviolent crime. Thank you.
Tonight's meeting will be broadcast on Valley Media Works Charter Channel 994 on Thursday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. following the meeting on WFRP LP 101.9 FM and online at valleymediaworks.org. The supervisors, the next item on our agenda is the roll call. We may have a problem with our electronics on this. Please take your keypads and indicate your presence, and we'll see if it works.
Gibson? McKinney? Here. Knight? Here. Pagonis? Here. Anton? Here. Moritz? Here. Chilson? Stelgis? Here. Maury? Coffey. Henning. Bates. Russell. Gatlin. Smyre.
Here.
Corboom. Neiman. Dunning. Wilkie. Anderson. Beckfield. Miller. Leary. DeLuca. Jansen. Schrocknagel. Buchanan.
Here.
Cronk. And Lavelle.
We have a quorum then. We do have a quorum. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is approval of the Journal of Proceedings, which you have in your packet. We'll do this by voice vote. Motion to approve from Supervisor Lavelle. Second. Second from Supervisor Anderson. Are there any deletions, any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the Journal of Proceedings, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Tonight we have two persons making comment. John Wagner is first. Please come forward. Are you presenting as a duo?
No.
Oh, just check.
You can if you like.
No, it's up to you. Are you coming separately then?
Yes, well,
Okay.
we drove together, but. she's
So,
fine.
I would ask Susan Wagner to stand over here to be ready to come up. Please come up.
I didn't sign up, can I still speak?
I'll call for that.
Okay.
Do I speak from this?
Yes,
podium?
please.
Okay, thank you.
This microphone is on.
Well, my name is John Wagner. I've been in the Chippewa Valley since 1985. I started working at Cray Research and ended up at Chippewa Valley Technical College in the engineering program. During the last 10 years or so, I've been studying child poverty, and I've come here tonight to speak to you, to urge you to pass the resolution that is before you tonight to reduce childhood poverty by and racial disparity by 1/2 in 10 years. I did not grow up in poverty. I probably grew up in lower middle class, but I have had experience with students in the programs at CVTC. In our particular program in engineering, about 65% of our students lived in poverty. These students not only had a full-time educational requirement, but they also had full-time jobs, and most of them also had families. And they struggled mightily to get good grades at CVTC. More importantly or in addition to that, actually, I have had a lot of experience. I've studied how the human brain develops, and there's numerous studies over the last 50 years by the U.S. government and the United Kingdom, the government of the United Kingdom, which have demonstrated that a child's brain and their schemas, that is how they look at life and how they react to life, are set by the time they're age 5. This is before they even enter public education. There have been many programs that have identified how to deal with childhood poverty. Some have been very successful. The one in the United Kingdom has been very successful. They were actually able to reduce childhood poverty by more than 50% in 10 years. This initiative was put forward by Tony Blair almost 20 years ago now. So there are many known ways of reducing childhood poverty beyond just social programs that the U.S. has been focusing on. And I would really urge you to support this resolution because it's a way of fixing adult outcomes in children that are, less than 5 years old. I mean, the studies show that when they're brought up in difficult situations, poverty, and they experience adverse conditions as a child, that they have very high percentages, 35 to 50% chances of either being incarcerated as an adult or being declared mentally ill. This is a way of helping our society to not only save those children, but to also reduce significantly the costs to society of dealing with the adult outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person is Susan Wagner. And then the lady who said she wished to speak, would you stand ready there, please? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm a resident of Eau Claire County and also a board member of Jonah, joining our neighbors Advancing Hope of the Chippewa Valley. I'm here tonight to voice my support of the adoption of the goals set forth by the End Child Poverty Wisconsin campaign resolution. All of you should have a copy of the fact sheet for this resolution, and I will not take the time to restate the supported details. I would like to emphasize, though, the goals of this initiative statewide. Number one, to decrease the level of child poverty and racial disparities by 50% over the next 10 years. Two, to implement policies and programs at the scale necessary to achieve this goal. And three, establish an annual evidence-based evaluation for progress accountability. My response to the plight of impoverished children in Chippewa Valley, in Wisconsin and beyond, is both emotional and comes from empathy. I also recognize the value of the economic and social benefits to our community, both local and beyond. Please vote yes tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please come forward and identify yourself, please. Thank you.
I'm Janet Fraze, and I'm a resident of the city of Eau Claire. I am here to support the adoption of the resolution intended to decrease child poverty. I recently spoke to the city council about homelessness and the lack of affordable housing. My main point to the city was this: it's very difficult to be healthy, mentally and physically, if you don't have safe and adequate housing. Child poverty is so closely intertwined with the lack of adequate housing and the same problems that follow from that lack: mental illness, substance abuse, chronic illness, especially in children. However, children are not in control of their life experience. We, the adults and the leaders of our community, are in control. Charity is wonderful, and we have a very caring and charitable community. But charity is not a long-term solution to a problem like child poverty. The long-term solution will come through education and regulation passed by people like you. So I am here to please, again, ask for your support to this resolution. It's a commitment to address the problem of child poverty and do some substantial programs to have a decrease in poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Anyone else? Anyone else who wishes to speak? The public comment period is now at an end. The next item on our agenda would be the oral reports, beginning with Catherine Schaaf.
Thank you. The item is listed as meet and greet for board members. This is an attempt to provide board members with opportunity to hear from departments on initiatives that are happening within the department. We asked for individuals to volunteer at different times to make these presentations, and what we will do is a half an hour before the board meeting on March 19th in room 1301 and 1302, the departments that have volunteered will be there, and every 10 minutes give a very brief presentation and overview of some of the services they provide. Board members are encouraged to go to each of them. We'll have 3 different groupings of individuals. Go to each individual area, learn about the programming, ask questions, and then we also encourage board members, if you want to dig a little deeper, you're able to ask for follow-up information or additional questions. And so the goal is to give you opportunity to interact with department managers and for the department managers to interact with you on an informal basis. We encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity, and we will be doing a survey after we have done a few of these to ascertain if the informational needs that you are hoping to achieve from this effort are sufficient and what your feelings are on this effort. So thank you again, and I would again encourage you to participate next or 2 weeks from this evening at 6:30 p.m. I'll take questions if they have them.
Are there any questions? Thank you. The next presentation is Chippewa Valley Housing Task Force Scott Allen and Josh Clements.
Good evening. I'm Scott Allen. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Eau Claire. And with me is
Josh Clements, City Planner for the City of Altoona.
what we want to do is walk through what's been going on with the Regional Housing Task Force, of which I know a few of you have been able to participate in. We've started with about 40 stakeholders back last June with our first meeting, and have grown to double in size to nearly 80 stakeholders. So thanks to everyone who's been a part of that, including staff, as well as a few of the board members here tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh to walk through kind of the background of where we were and where we're headed.
Thank you, Scott. So as I understand, we have about 15 to 20 minutes, and so this is a very complex issue which it touches everyone. So we'll try to be concise and then reserve some time for questions. So briefly, we started out back actually in February of last year. This was kind of bubbling up in a number of places, including in the popular press, about housing being an increasing issue in the region. Myself, our city administrator Mike Golot, and our mayor Brendan Pratt, who's also here, us and among 70 or 80 other people attended a housing forum in New Richmond put on by Momentum West. We got trained up from a bunch of people who have been working on issues around the state. I would say that they're looking to host another one this summer, I believe, and so we'll be continuing our sharing. In March or April, we were trying to figure out how do we approach this issue, because this is not a one jurisdiction issue, it's not a one sector issue, so we decided that kind of an amorphous task force would be created. We would try to reach out to every stakeholder who wanted to be involved. There's been no barrier to participating. There were certain people who we knew we needed to reach out to initially, and then kind of through networking, bring more people in. We had our first task force meeting in June, and we had 4 larger task force groups, and we've met with dozens of individuals and small groups over that time. And as Scott said, we've continued to grow. Our focus is a voluntary assemblage of stakeholders to better understand this challenge, investigate solutions, and facilitate elevated cooperation. We recognize that there's lots of separate investigations and efforts that have been going on around the region for some time. They weren't really working with or even aware of each other. So our first step was just to get our arms around this challenge. The purpose is to take our first steps into how do we align people around common goals, a common understanding of what these challenges are, and we're not, this isn't a completion, this is a benchmark along the way. This is a goal statement. I'm not going to read it for you because I think you all can hopefully see this and read. So we agreed that housing is a crucial component of our communities. It touches everyone, regardless of your assets that you have, regardless of what impediments you might have to achieving safe and affordable housing. And so this wasn't just an exclusively homelessness issue, it wasn't exclusively an economic development issue, it wasn't exclusively a neighborhood revitalization issue. It's all of those things. We'll need to prioritize where our limited efforts and resources will be placed, but we needed to understand where we could be most effectively targeted. As I said, we met several times throughout the year. We'll briefly touch on those. We met in August. CVTC, we touched on the ALICE report findings, which Scott will dive into. We started to figure out how do we come from out here towards kind of in a funnel. We're starting at the top and we're getting towards the middle. Our third meeting was over in Altoona, and we talked more about specific questions amongst those who were assembled. In the interim, between our third and fourth meeting, we decided we need to have more specific sector meetings, so get people who have lived experience in various challenges to securing housing, and some of the support agencies which provide assistance for those people together to dive into that issue specifically. Builders and developers, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. What challenges do you have in delivering housing? Zoning and policy, again, from the government perspective, what impediments are there that we see, and then the finance community was where the impediments to financing housing. We met, our most recent meeting was in December. We came up with some initial recommendations, which we were fine tuning, and then working on our report. As I said, there are a number of concurrent efforts. So the Eau Claire Housing Coalition has been meeting for at least several years. It's predominantly the service providers and agencies that get together on a monthly basis to make sure everyone's aligned on what opportunities are coming up, funding, looking for resources, volunteers, et cetera. Jonah, as some of our initial speakers talked about, created an affordable housing task force this past year, and so they've really been providing kind of a active citizen perspective. There are other citizens who are involved who are not part of Jonah, but they're a focal point. Dunn County is I think a little bit earlier in their housing investigations, but there's been communication back and forth with those folks. And then there was a homelessness push through the hiring a consultant in October to dive more deeply into the homelessness challenge. As a summary, we have 16 consensus statements. We defined affordable because that was kind of a question. Affordable housing is most typically defined as housing expenses that comprise no more than 30% of gross income. If you're greater than that, you're considered to be housing burdened. If you're more than 50%, you're significantly housing burdened. And Scott will touch on some of the data there. We defined some of the segments because we recognize that there are solutions that don't apply to everyone. People are coming from various points, particularly financial and otherwise, and demographic, that create challenges to accessing housing. We collected data on income measures, and then we're working on our housing data.
All right, thank you. Switch around here just real quickly. Again, a lot of the data we ended up identifying actually was at the county level, so very applicable to the work that you're all doing as well. Compared it with other counties in the state. The Alice data, I'll get into that here in just a moment, but just to kind of set the stage a little bit, one of the top things that we identified was the fact that Eau Claire County is 41st in median income in the state, and that's an important benchmark because the state average, or state median I should say, is not quite $57,000, and we're a full $7,000 below that. So with that, combined with the fact that Eau Claire County is 22nd in housing costs, so bottom third in income, top third in housing costs, and you can see that you actually tracking with the same monthly average as the state. Some of the other rankings, again, talk a little bit more about the components that go into the Alice data. Child care, also kind of that top third, as well as taxes. So just important to identify the fact that although this group, this task force, is really focused on the housing component of the equation, there are a number of other costs that really impact affordability and folks being cost burdened. Again, ALICE is acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. So not necessarily in that deep poverty level. Again, it's households that are more than federal poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living for the county. Here's some of the data for specifically to Eau Claire County. This is the trend line. This is done approximately every 2 years. So the data, again, it's a kind of a snapshot in time. It is back in 2016. It's released kind of 2 years later. United Way puts this information out throughout a number of states. You can see that middle blue, light blue bar is that ALICE number, and that's an important one to look at, is that how that you've seen that trend line increasing over the last several years. Specifically, again, to incomes, it's really important to identify the fact that kind of single cohabitating, that's going to be one of the larger segments that is struggling. Like a third of them are in that ALICE segment, and then the same with 65 and older. So those are the areas that really are calling out the fact that there are some income issues and some asset issues related to that. It'll be a little bit hard to read this, apologize, but these are each of the different towns, villages, and cities in Eau Claire County. Again, this is readily available online as well. This is showing the different governing bodies and such throughout the county. City of Eau Claire, for example, 46% are in Alice and poverty, kind of a combined number. You can see some are quite higher than that. Not many a lot lower. Household survival budget. This is kind of breaking down each of those different costs as I was talking about just a moment ago. You can see here highlighted housing. The first that middle column, excuse me, is that single individual, but obviously costs start increasing as more people are added to the household, especially those with greater needs. The example that they gave are 2 adults with an infant and a preschooler, so you can see childcare is quite a large component of that budget. Housing, again, that's $735 as I mentioned, but you can see as well transportation. So we start talking about needs as you get further out from kind of the core cities into the unincorporated parts of the county. Obviously, some of these things become even more costly in terms of transportation needs, access to lower priced food. Talk about food deserts, things of that sort. Healthcare is actually quite a high number as well. It didn't break that down in those numbers in terms of rankings, but Eau Claire County is on the higher side. Really, food is one of those where it's on the lowest or the lower end. Everything else is kind of towards the higher end with a lower relative income. Here's just some information about private sector employment. Just kind of stating a bit of the obvious that on the left-hand side, these are segments of different sizes of businesses. Obviously, smaller the business, the lower the wages, and then larger firms with larger employees, you can see higher wages. But even that, again, these averages are even well below the state and county median. I just won't dwell on this too much, but again, if you can go by the colors here, the top are higher wage segments or ranges, and the bottom are the lower. And you can see that, again, just visually showing how the fact that wages are primarily on the lower end in Eau Claire County. The orange bar is Eau Claire County, green is state, and then blue is national. So you can see on the higher end of wages, not as many in that segment as on the lower end. This shows that type of information in relation to housing inventory. Blue are those different wage categories, and orange showing the different housing inventory. The important thing to identify here are kind of these ends of this curve, as it were. The fact that the lower wage earners have a lot less access to affordable housing. And you can see here that those are in the higher end of the market as well, have less inventory, but then again are kind of all, say, fighting for, but all working to access housing in that middle range. So point being, kind of on the ends, you see the lack of inventory, but obviously focusing on the very low income being the most in desperate need. Won't dwell on this either. This just shows some of those numbers a little bit more specifically, what the average monthly rent based on the type of incomes and jobs available in the county. Just over $900 is considered affordable for monthly mortgage or rent, and a loan would be $123,000. This shows a little bit more of this, as Josh mentioned, anything over 30% of your income going to housing, you're considered cost burdened. For the county, owners and renters are about the same, between 30 and 50%, but you start to see renters becoming more numerous above that 50% range. Housing costs, we want to highlight here, again, across the county, even the different cities as well. The majority of monthly costs are around $1,000 to $1,500 for homeowner mortgage, with the median being $1,269. For renting, it's between $500 and $1,000. I forgot to highlight this one, but it's around $787 is that median. And again, about 64% of renters are in that range. And what this does is show us kind of what the what is actually being spent on housing in the county, and then we can start working the numbers in terms of affordability based on those other cost inputs, as you show in the Alice report. This too, again, anything over 30%, over, as we mentioned, kind of 48% in the county are in that cost burdened area in terms of renting. So I'll turn it back over to Josh to close this out.
Thanks, Scott. So some of our tables were difficult to read on your projector, so let us know and we can make sure that all this information gets sent out. It was presented to the City of Eau Claire, it's been presented to the City of Altoona, so it's in our meeting packets, but contact us directly with any questions and things like that. So there are other factors. So we looked at income specifically. Well, there's more to it than that. There's household wealth, there's generational wealth. Not everyone's starting from the same position. That has a lot to do with what kind of housing you can access. Are you getting a down payment assistance from somewhere else? Is it an arm's length transaction when you're acquiring your property? Things like that. That makes a big difference as people accumulate wealth over time. Wages versus investment. So what we looked at was wage income. As we see, especially as you go up your personal income, more and more of that is coming from investments. And so, that data is separate. The other items that are play into it, again, that we didn't touch on were student loans, additional issue, especially for people who are approximately under age 35, people graduating with unprecedented levels of debt. That makes them delay housing decisions, and this is another payment that they have to take into consideration. Vehicles, also, the price of vehicles are certainly not going down, if anyone's noticed. And then medical debt. It's the #1 source of bankruptcy in the country. So as we presented on solely household income is how affordability is looked at, but there are lots of other complications that are financially related. So recommendations, we broke down recommendations into 5 categories. There are multiple items under each of these. We're not going to dwell on them specifically. Again, we can make the report as available. Generally, development regulations deal with zoning predominantly and zoning related standards. So where are the zones enforced and what are those standards in those zones? We've heard from developers as well as finance people that there's just not a lot of property that's available to increase supply, especially in places where transportation is available and that there are jobs nearby. City policies, particularly, how does the city advance or constrain housing development and housing affordability through non-development related policy? Public funding, there's a variety of tools that are out there, of which Scott and I are still trying to figure out, which might be most appropriate for us to participate in the financial financing of housing, particularly for affordable housing. And then public-private partnerships. So some of these are financial and some of them are not. So some of them are just facilitating these connections to happen between developers, people who are concerned about housing. This is an area where we've seen most traction so far, just from having this task force together. Developers are meeting people who have property, finance people who are interested, and so we're starting to see some deals being made just in the short period of time that we've been meeting. And we're also learning about other situations, particularly like employer-assisted housing. And then civic. So this is really important. This is our community narrative. This is the people who don't necessarily have a formal role in government, or you're not in one of these industries. It's how do we build a culture around housing where people recognize some of the challenges, that there's support for people to access safe and affordable housing, particularly in their neighborhoods, to celebrate successes when we achieve them, as well as to interact with public officials and others so that we can accurately identify where are the challenges and where are the opportunities to be had. Next steps, we have a task force meeting on Wednesday. Again, it's open for anyone who wants to attend. It's going to be at 8 o'clock. We're not certain on the location, but we're going to get that figured out this week. We're going to take those draft recommendation reports, try to get some finality on those, and then figure out how do we move on from there. We've been presenting publicly, as I said, City Council of Eau Claire, Altoona, our respective plan commissions are taking this on, and then we're going to look at our work plans. So how do we as cities deal with some of these recommendations? What does it mean for municipal government? There are recommendations in there that deal with private sector and civic as well. And then how do we continue to nurture those partnerships, whether it's with private industry or with civic groups who are interested in this area? So that, Mr. Chair, we'll take questions if you have.
Yes, are there any questions or comments? Supervisor Wilkie.
A comment, and maybe you can react to it. Over the years, it's been my observation in different roles that our quality of our housing stock has improved in recent years. And of course, one would say that that's a good thing. Less slum landlords. On the other hand, the affordability then has been a problem. In the past, and I'm sure not encouraging slum landlords and bad housing stock, but those were the ones that would rent to individuals at a price they could afford. They'd negotiate the deposits and all those things, as well as they weren't so picky on background checks. And then, of course, this affects people coming out of our jail or been in situations of domestic violence, even if they're not the perpetrator. Landlords are shy of renting to somebody who is separated from that issue and was the victim. Theoretically, background isn't supposed to come into play. In reality, CCAP, it does. No landlord's going to tell you, yeah, I check the list I got here and I go through CCAP and see what's in the background check, but I assure you they do, in fact. So folks that even are victims have tough time getting housing, and of course then they're likely to be in a financial situation, difficult time. Their income was low maybe in the beginning, and if it wasn't, it certainly is at that time. So I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not encouraging you to move the direction of more slum landlords, but as we've decreased those in the community, the difficulty for individuals in those special categories of getting housing and getting affordable housing has gotten worse. That's my observation over the years. So it's a plus and a minus.
Do you like your response, or?
Feel free.
Okay. So there's a lot in your statement. I think we'll start by saying that as we've worked with a lot of our stakeholders, public health is a huge part of housing and vice versa. And so working with our health department, as they've been doing studies throughout the community, housing is near the top of their concerns. You're right that there's a supply and demand, going on. So if you increase the quality, there's more investment going into that property. The landlords need a return, and so that's a delicate balance. How do we figure that out? And we don't have a quick answer for that. One thing that one of the recommendations was to create a tenant and landlord resource center, which has worked in some other places to figure out how do we work with landlords to make cost-effective improvements. How do we work with tenants to make sure that they understand their rights as a tenant? How can they be a good tenant? And if they have some of these impediments, on their record, or they might have accessibility challenges, how can they seek situations that meet their needs? And there's a variety of programs that exist now to help landowners make improvements to their properties, particularly when there is a health, safety, welfare challenge. I think those resources are generally not sufficient for demand. What we've also heard is from developers is that how do we manage our risk in the situation? Many of them said we would like to lease to folks who maybe have a less than perfect record. But when supply is so constrained, there's a balance that goes with that. And we heard quite a lot from people who have these impediments and who have felt like they've been discriminated against in our community. And so we're hoping that such a tenant center or something similar to that will help people get set up with landlords who are willing, who understand, they're on a journey to stable housing. And so how can we also work with that tenant, future tenant, to make sure those relationships are workable? And I'd also add that from the county's perspective, a lot of these services that people of modest means or other challenges, physical or mental challenges, face, they're seeking services through the county. Those are largely county services. And so there's real motivation to, get those people in stable housing. So hopefully some of those costs can be stabilized.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Supervisor Boardwalm, your light was lit. Have you canceled?
My answer, my
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Leary.
Chair, yes, I am on the County Housing Authority, as is Lydia. And one of the items that we've noticed in our efforts is we've had continual cuts from HUD funding. And so that has hampered our ability to be able to increase and meet the increased needs in the community. I know there's been a lot of individuals and a lot of organizations that have been looking at this. I applaud you for your efforts. I think this is a wonderful group, and I think that there's a lot that we can do to help with education. One of the difficulties, though, is funding. And I liked what you were saying, how you were looking at other successes and ways to kind of reward the ones that help. And I've been doing some reading lately where some businesses are starting. I know some of the teachers out in California have been getting grants from their school districts to help with housing for the low-income teachers. There's other areas that have been looking at this as well for their employees. So anything that we can do on the problem is wonderful. I think if we could also maybe help focus a little bit on the increased costs. As the wages have not been able to keep up with the costs, maybe there's some things we can do to help. But as someone said, if we, for example, don't have parking for an apartment building for low-cost housing, then you run into the issues with plowing, for example, that all of us have been going through. So, but I applaud you, and anything that we can do, we are more than happy to assist. But if there's a way you can figure out more funding, we'd happily work with you on that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, gentlemen, for your
All right,
report.
thank you. Appreciate
The
that.
next report is from the Director of the City County Health Department, Lisa Gagisi, on efforts on homelessness, accompanied by Tom Worth, Assistant Director of the Department of Human Services.
So thank you, Chair Smyer and supervisors. We are here to give you a very short update on homelessness and issues in Eau Claire County. And Tom Worth is here, as well as Keith Jonathan from City Housing Authority and City Housing Division. I didn't quite get that correct. Just available to answer questions if you have them. This is a complicated issue. In 5 or 10 minutes, we're not going to talk about it all. We want to make sure that, if nothing else, all of you leave understanding that, yes, there are homeless people in Eau Claire County. So some people aren't understanding that in this community. So if nothing else, I want you to make sure that you leave with that information, and that you know a little bit about some of the ongoing efforts that are happening, as well as some newer things that are happening related to homelessness. And it'll build off the presentation that you just heard. Certainly people experiencing homelessness are on that continuum of housing challenges in this community, and really, I would say, at the most dire end of that continuum. It's complicated. There are no easy solutions. People experiencing homelessness often have many other factors that are challenging for them. Again, we could talk a lot about that. A personal story, I brought my 18-year-old son with me to Sojourner during that really cold weather that we had in January. And he had not been inside that building before. And when we came home, he said to me, "Wow, people looked different than what I expected." And I think if you reflect on that a little bit about, what do we think homelessness looks like in Eau Claire County, it's an important thing to think about. We don't have great data in this community, but we do know that typically over 300 children in the Eau Claire School District are experiencing homelessness and are worked with by their homeless coordinator every year for the last number of years. The kind of firmer count we have for the HUD definition of homelessness, and this is where we could get in the weeds, and we won't tonight, 124 individuals in Eau Claire and 41 families meet the HUD definition for homelessness. There are a lot more people than that in this community that are homeless. They're sleeping on someone's couch, they're sleeping in their car, they're in a situation that we don't quite have them on the list, but there are many people. Majority of people that we see in the sheltering system are from Eau Claire County or from the neighboring communities. So again, there's a perception, I think, in the community that many people are not from here and why are they coming here, but that doesn't bear out in the data that is collected. We should care about it. As County Board Supervisor, homelessness is an issue that impacts all of the programs and services that you support at the county level, and that was referenced earlier. Kids that don't have a home have a tough time learning. Adults that don't have a home have a tough time getting to jobs. It's at a very, very basic level. And there's lots of data that just show that it's cheaper to house someone than it is to pay for all the services that exist. So lots is happening in Eau Claire. There's critical work being done by a whole variety of agencies, and I think many of you know those. So all of our sheltering organizations, Western Dairyland, Positive Avenues, a daytime shelter, Sojourner House, Family Promise, the library is doing things. I mean, we could go on and on about the things that are currently happening to help support people that are experiencing homelessness. But the need keeps growing. So there's been recent work that Tom's going to talk a little bit about to say, let's step back a little bit and really think about how do we prevent homelessness rather than keep responding to it. The fire keeps getting bigger. Some of the groups that were talked about earlier by Josh and Scott, Eau Claire Housing Coalition, Porch, the Zero Initiative, the Jonah Affordable Housing Group, lots of people that are really wanting to do something to address homelessness. And the goal that we have in this community is like, can we get in the same boat and row together rather than having separate boats? We really think that there's a possibility to make homelessness a brief and rare occurrence rather than something that people experience long term. So I'm going to shift it to Tom. He's going to talk about a couple of the things that are happening most recently, and then certainly we can answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the events that are going on currently that are addressing and hopefully will address this issue of homelessness. Back in October, as was mentioned, Erin Healy came to our community. And Erin is a national consultant who is from Brooklyn, New York, and her job has been to go around to communities like ours to help focus the spotlight on issues of homelessness. And she would say, I don't have a magic wand. I don't have a magic wand for you, but what I do have is the ability to bring groups together so that we collectively and collaboratively are working towards getting in that boat that Lisa referenced and all going in the same direction. She talks about a project called a Sprint. A Sprint is really a small part of an enormous problem, and she breaks it down into small little timelines and achievable events. So this problem of homelessness is huge, and where do we begin to tackle it? She would suggest by taking out small little parts and creating these 100-day sprints. So she was with us in October and did that large community assessment and took a look at some of our data. And as Lisa said, the data is not that good. It's hard to gather. It's hard to find. But to take a look at that data and look at the programs that we're offering. And now she's coming back in mid-April to begin that sprint with us to work towards a very achievable outcome in 100 days to see what kind of impact we can have on one element of homelessness. A number of for-profit and non-for-profit and government dollars have come together to bring Erin to our community. The other thing that I wanted to touch base on, and actually Tyler Esch was here February 20th and talked a little bit about the extreme weather conditions that we have had. And we know that those conditions are hard on us, but they really affect our homeless population to a far greater degree. And so one of the things that we are working on collectively is, and Tyler is bringing this group back together again to say, okay, we did a great job of pulling together transportation and housing and daytime services to really prevent people from being out in the cold. But that was done kind of on a last minute kind of event, and we need to be more thoughtful and planful so that when the next one hits, and I'm afraid the next one will hit at some point, that we are better prepared. We also need to keep in mind that 5 months from now, we're going to be talking about cooling shelters and where are people going to stay cool and where are people going to have air conditioning. And we need to be prepared to respond to that. So Tyler's bringing us back together in a couple of weeks actually to begin talking about what should those plans look like so that there's some sustainability to them. So those are the two events that I wanted to talk about and make sure that we were at least bring you folks up to speed on. I don't know if we have any other thing else, otherwise we are,
Mr. Jonathan, are you?
I'm here just to answer
You're
questions.
a resource, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments? Supervisor Wilkie.
It's been a while since I've been closely involved with working with the homeless population, so maybe some of my assumptions have changed. One assumption that hasn't changed, and I was glad to hear that these folks are citizens primarily of our county, that it's a myth that they come from Timbuktu. They're Eau Claire County folks, and we have an obligation to assist them. I'm also under the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, not exclusively, but a high percentage of our homeless population are experiencing and suffering mental illness. And of course, to get them Social Security disability payments in itself, having that illness, getting them to work with you is a challenge. I understand that. The question I have is, and I understand when you do that process, darn it, the Social Security office, first time around, usually denies it. That was my experience in the past. But then if you got the resource of a pro bono attorney, amazingly, when the facts are gathered and it's pushed, it gets approved. In other words, if you got the system behind you to deal with the system, you got a chance to get Social Security. Now, it's usually, in the past, maybe that's improved, and tell me so if it has, it takes at least 3 to 6 months before they're going to even see any money to be able to get housing, even with somebody appointed to handle the money. I'm wondering what we are doing or what we should be doing in our jails, in our shelters, on the street, in our support services to assist those folks that are suffering from mental illness, getting that disability payment that they're entitled to.
So I'll take a first crack at that, and certainly my colleagues can chime in. I think what we are doing is we are certainly, and we presented at the last meeting about some of the jail services that we're doing, and we are doing that. We are presenting ourselves in the jail, being in the jail to help people to be able to document that and to move that through the process, hopefully a little bit quicker. So that's one thing that I believe we're doing. I think you're also right, Supervisor Wilkie, that it does take some time for the federal government to recognize Social Security disability and to really get that payment to folks. That is a systemic problem that I don't have a solution for, but it is one that is out there. I think the third point that I would make is the caricature that you drew of the typical person who's homeless is certainly accurate, but I would also just add that the Alice report would suggest to us that a lot of people who are in our community are one paycheck away from being homeless. And so that is, I think, a different maybe different than what it was 10, 15 years ago. Those folks are much more, not maybe don't have the diagnosis of a psychiatric condition or a substance abuse disorder, but are just plain old making ends meet. And if there's one bump in the road, they could be homeless.
Thank you. Supervisor Buchanan, did you indicate, please?
Thank you so much. One of the comments that was made that kind of a little bit in passing that I wanted to highlight and kind of bring to the forefront, you can address more maybe, is that statement of that it's actually cheaper. Like even setting aside the human interest level and the morality and treating humans like people, that it's actually cheaper. I think my understanding from the, this is a few years old now, but the National Alliance to End Homelessness from November of 2015 noted that the average chronic homeless person cost public, national statistic, just over $35,500, whereas supportive housing would be under $13,000. You mentioned the cold that's been out there. I can imagine that people who are homeless are less healthy and use emergency room services, Badger Care, or just private citizens having higher rates to make up for lost revenues. What really frustrates me about this whole problem, there's lots of things, and I'm sure for you as well. One of them is, if it's cheaper, then that means we're already spending the money right now. So when we talk about do we have the money to do X, if we don't do X, we're going to spend twice as much later. So my question to you all would be, maybe you don't have an answer right now, but how can we repurpose existing dollars in our budgets to say, okay, I know that the spreadsheets say we should be doing X, but what if we just didn't? And we took that money and got people housing first. I think Los Angeles County saw a 20% reduction in their budget overall when they just started doing that even when they didn't have the money to do it. It saved them money. So that's kind of my question to you all, is like, how can we repurpose existing dollars that it looks like we can't repurpose, but if we did, we'd actually save money?
So I can just jump in that not an answer tonight, but definitely part of the conversation. There is clear understanding that money is being spent, and we are a fairly siloed response system right now, and the conversation really has been is how do we move from a fairly siloed response system to a collaborative preventive system. So do know that that is exactly the conversation that's been going on. We're always going to need response. That's not going to go away, but spending a whole lot less on response would be helpful. I think we're encouraged that the partners that have come to the table to talk about this, including healthcare system partners as one example of where there is money being spent that could be saved if we actually housed people, are wanting to talk, and they want to be part of the solution. The governor's budget that was released last week, I can't remember time frame anymore, does include also additional dollars that they are looking at from Medicaid savings to invest in some homeless programs. So I think there is some renewed interest at the state and local level around that, and certainly part of our conversations.
Thank you. Supervisor Stelzis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be a tough question. You might want to choose not to answer it, but happened to me today. I was out running some errands and driving around, and was driving out of the Menards East parking lot and going around a corner, and there's a guy standing on the corner. It's really cold out there. He's got a sign holding up, says homeless, help any way you can. My heart really went out for him. I felt really bad. But honestly, I don't know what the recommended response is. Can you suggest a recommended response when you see that kind of thing?
Such a tough question. I don't know. So interestingly, I was walking my dog on Friday when it was getting so cold, and a woman in downtown was slumped down in one of the storefronts. And I thought, Liska, you're walking right past this person. What are you doing? After talking about people experiencing homelessness and how uncomfortable that is for us, right?
Exactly,
It's uncomfortable, and we don't know what to do. I did end up going back and said, do you need some help? And she needed help getting up. And I walked with her then, 2.5 blocks down to Sojourner. That was a little bit, in some ways, more concrete than the experience, because I think all of us have had that experience. I don't know what homeless experts actually would tell you to do. I don't know, maybe people know in this room. None of the three of us necessarily are homelessness experts. That's one of our challenges here, is that there's nobody in charge of homelessness in Eau Claire County, right? Everybody's in charge of a piece of it, but there isn't it's like all of us have this as something that we see as really important and we see as an important outcome for all of our areas of work, but there isn't one agency or one person responsible. So I don't know if I wish I had a good answer for you. Do you guys have
Let me just sneak by here.
lean in when you can, maybe, but in that situation, it's tough.
I think in that situation, as we've all maybe faced in our lifetime, something like that, you really have to go based on what you feel morally to be correct as a human being, helping your fellow homeless person. You just do what you instinctively feel that you should do. That's kind of what this whole thing is about. We talked about it being a collaborative. It's about different groups, not just the service providers in the area, but government, businesses that are going to come together to try and find some solutions collaboratively as to how to end certain phases of homelessness, whether it's the chronically homeless, whether it's veterans homelessness, whether it's family homelessness. And just because there's one sprint forthcoming does not mean that that will be the end of it. Our goal and our hope is that we will continue on this path with the next sprint. We identify what the most important aspect of homelessness is facing us, and then move on to that, and then so on. But yeah, it's tough. It really is tough. I mean, when I hear about homeless children, boy, that gets me. It really makes me angry, and I really feel that that's an important issue. No child should be in a situation where they don't know where they're going to sleep at night. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. It's important, and I'm not telling you what you should do, but I'm saying, with all sincerity, we all need to realize that it is an issue, it is important, and it's something that we all should take seriously and hopefully want to be a part of. That's all I have.
Thank you. Supervisor Bourville.
Thank you. I was just wondering what steps have been taken or are being taken to collect more data about the numbers?
So again, probably none of the three of us are the experts on that. There is a data system that's required for any of the shelters, and the data on people that are HUD definition homeless. The shelter information is captured for Eau Claire County. Twice a year, point-in-time data is collected on people that one evening, winter, and one evening in the summer. Point-in-time data is collected on people experiencing that day homelessness. And then we have data that we get from the school district, again, a slightly different definition of homeless. So one of the goals of the collaborative that we're working on now is to really wrap our hands around the data and present it in a clearer way, because what we haven't had is just clean kind of messages about what the data is showing us. So that is going to be part of the work.
Yeah, and I would just add that one of the challenges that we have is, by nature of the group of people we're working with, they're homeless and they're hard to keep track of. And so that data continually moves around on us a little bit. And one day you could be on the list, and the next day you could get housing and be off the list. And so it is a challenge to get that data and to keep it all organized. But communities have done that, and we're committed to making sure that that becomes a reality for us, so that we have good, solid data to be able to reflect back.
Thank you. Supervisor Knight to be followed by Supervisor Schroff. And I'll go with our final comment or question. Supervisor Knight.
I was curious what goes on with a sprint, and don't we need more of a long-term thing, more of a marathon to resolve this issue?
So the goal of the sprint is really to pick something that's doable and changeable. It's kind of like a QI process, a change process, and say, what are we doing now related to this very specific thing? And what do we think we can change that will make it better? So they are going to be, it's not going to be end all homelessness for every person in Eau Claire in 90 days. It'll be something very specific that a team will work on and say, we think we can do this piece better. And then they work on it to make that improvement rather than, just being so overwhelmed by the complexity. So yes, we would probably, as Keith said, need lots of sprints to get us, to the next point.
And you're right, it is a marathon, but we can only do it one step at a time. And so we're going to be taking that first step, and that sprint is really that first step. To hopefully getting to a point where we become and develop some self-confidence in our ability to actually accomplish this task.
For our final comment, Supervisor Schroff-Nagel.
This is something for Keith, I think, more than the other two of you. Keith, how long is the list, and how long does it take to work through the list to get city-county housing taken care of as you are working with it daily?
I'm not sure about the county, but the City of Eau Claire Housing Authority's waiting list is approximately 330 households, whether they be families with children or individuals for our handicap/elderly apartments. The family units can go anywhere up to 18 months. It takes a while, whereas our apartment complex, Owen Rust and Park Tower Apartments, there's a more rapid turnaround there. So you could see some vacancies. If you get on a list this month, you could see something next month or within the next 2 months.
Thank you.
So
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, and thank you. I would just share that you're seeing 3 government people up here, but this has really been a partnership with lots of folks across the community. So do know that it's not about how government is going to solve this. It really is about how we as a community will be working on it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. You have notice in your packet of a rezoning request from an owner, the American Express Transportation, and this is notice to you that the application has been received and it will come forward at some time to this board for resolution. The second item is proclamation for Fair Housing Week, and I ask our county clerk to read it.
I'll just mention the Fair Housing Proclamation that was,
Oh, I'm sorry. There.
the Fair Housing Proclamation that's in your county board packet had Greg Moore as the chairperson. That has been corrected. Proclaiming March 17th through March 23rd, 2019 as Fair Housing Week in the County of Eau Claire. Whereas the purpose of the Federal Fair Housing Law is to make fair housing a reality for all, regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, marital status, lawful source of income, handicap, or familial status, and whereas there is a need to continue to reinforce the concepts of freedom of choice, equality, and an opening housing market to prevent discriminatory practices from continuing. And whereas promoting fair housing is the responsibility of everyone, and whereas it is the policy of the county to prohibit discrimination in housing, thereby assuring equal opportunity to all persons to live in decent, safe, and sanitary housing facilities. Now, therefore, Nick Smyer, chairperson of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors, does proclaim the week of March 17th through March 23rd as Fair Housing Week.
We look for confirmation by the board, so could I have a motion to approve? Supervisor Leary, second. Supervisor Dunning. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. We have a change in our agenda. Under item number 8 on your agenda, all three of those items really belong under number 10. So we're going to move, we have nothing for item 9. We'll move to item 10 and take up first file number 103. That's the child poverty.
Requesting support for legislation aimed at decreasing the level of child poverty and racial disparities in the state of Wisconsin.
Motion, please. Motion by Supervisor Jansen, second by Supervisor Henning. Who will speak to this? Supervisor Neiman. Oh, sorry, I should turn on your microphone. There.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The information provided by these wonderful people tonight, as well as the fact sheet, demonstrate the need for action on decreasing child poverty and racial disparities. We have experience in other countries, Great Britain, for example, as well as in United States history in the 1960s and 70s. We were successful in doing this, and so reduction in poverty is a possible thing. There's plenty of research and experience that shows the benefit to individuals and society in terms of health, quality of life, and economy. What is needed at this point is political will. In order to avoid getting bogged down in an argument of how are we going to do this, the first step is to support and put into legislation the goals that are presented before you, namely decreasing child poverty and its racial disparities by 1/2 in 10 years, to identify and implement evidence-based plan for achieving the goals, and to evaluate the programs adopted annually for success or lack of success, and change if there has been no success. At this point, there is no fiscal impact, but what we do need is a commitment for future action. At this point, Citizens Action of Wisconsin, Kids Forward, Wisconsin Council of Churches, locally the Jonah faith-based community organizing group, and the state Parent of Wisdom have supported these goals. And most recently, the City County Board of Health has also adopted a similar resolution. So I would ask you at this point to speak on behalf of the children and support this resolution.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion? Supervisor Jansen.
So I just wanted to kind of echo Supervisor Neiman's words and the words that we've heard up here today about the importance of us taking action on this, and then also on the importance of us making that commitment to take action. And one thing that I wanted to share with everybody is that there is an opportunity for us, you know, not only tonight by this vote to take action, but there is an event coming up. Not sure if this is the appropriate time. I tried to push my button earlier to share this, so would it be?
I will
okay.
call for any communications, but feel free to share it now.
Okay, perfect. So there is, I serve on the UW Extension Committee, and UW Extension is partnering with the BRAIN team, and the BRAIN stands for, it's an acronym for Brain Research Awareness Integration Network. And the mission of this organization is to promote optimal development of all children by integrating current brain research into educational, child care, parenting, prevention, and intervention programs in Eau Claire County. They have a conference coming up on April 4th that is going to cover so many of the things that were talked about. It's going to open up with going over the ALICE report. They're having a speaker on poverty and how it's going to affect your brain development. And then they also have another speaker coming in, and his topic is, he's calling him the hope dealer. And so what he summarizes it is he is going to help us build living and learning communities where people have the opportunity to succeed. And so I call for you not only to take your action tonight by supporting this resolution, but to also take it one step further and to try to make the effort to attend that event on April 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Buchanan.
Yes, thank you. What we heard from our last presentation and coming into this resolution, one of the comments that was made by Keith was how homeless children really got to him, and I just wanted to make sure that we knew the exact number, or not the exact number because that's always difficult, but the number's 300. There are 300 homeless children in Eau Claire schools right now. I want to say that, and then also I want to say how thankful I am that this resolution doesn't just talk about economic inequality in general, that it brings in the racial justice aspect to it. Because that has been an area that has been really lacking, and we need to talk about that and be serious about that. It's difficult, if not almost impossible, to build wealth, to go from one generation to another, to have families lift themselves up from poverty, if those families are being destroyed financially. I want to share that one of my friends of mine, Andrew Worthman, recently got the deed to his house, the initial deed from the 1800s, and when they platted out and they built it in the platted in the 1800s and then built in the 1900s. The deed to his house says that said premises shall not be occupied by a colored person. Official government document. We still have people living today from when Eau Claire was a sundown town. Don't be in our city when the sun goes down. Why am I saying that about childhood poverty? Because you can't have wealth. Kids are going to be continuously in poverty if we have family systems where for generation after generation, families were not allowed to build wealth. So as we're moving forward, I think it's imperative on all of us to be mindful about the racial disparities in all of the policies that we enact, and how can we correct for those past mistakes that we are still healing from.
Thank you. Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll bring attention to, on the fact sheet number 9, the state organizations who have brought this movement forward. We've been working the past year and gathering signatures to send to the state legislature. Wisdom tells us, which is Jonah's parent organization, that Eau Claire County passing this evening, we would be the first county in the state of Eau Claire to do this. So we would set a precedent and be an example for other counties to follow us. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody for the work that's gone into this resolution, and I feel like I agree to this this came out of Human Services when we put it forward. And at the time I was reading in the paragraph that starts on line 12, I was wondering as a typo if when we're talking about the different children, we kind of go back from kids to children, the way that it reads. I'm wondering if we should just, in that paragraph, replace kids with children, because we seem to kind of go back and forth in that paragraph. I don't know what anybody else thinks or if that's appropriate.
The clerk has pointed out that fact on the resolution. We can do it in either one of two ways. Mm-hmm. Without objection, we can make the change. Without objection, the change is made.
The other thing too, I just was looking at line 12 through 16.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, should have been more specific.
Okay.
Should have too.
Yeah, I should have too.
That's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you. The other thing I want to add on to what Supervisor Buchanan was saying, because I've been thinking about this since the Human Services meeting, and when we read the paragraph starting with line 18, and we're looking at 19, the fact that kids are clearly not responsible for their own plight, and that poverty is a result of human-made economic and social structures. When we go down to line 43, the be it further resolved, I want to see if I can make a motion to make an amendment before we...
You are free to make a motion to amend.
Okay. I would like to amend, because we're talking about racial disparities and we're talking about education, in line, I'll just read the whole thing. Starting line 43, this is my amendment proposal. Be it further resolved that the Eau Claire County Board supports and encourages ongoing education and opportunity for dialogue about childhood poverty, hunger, and discriminatory economic and social structures in Wisconsin. Because I think we need to have more dialogue and we need to have more education around discriminatory economic and social structures that create poverty.
I want to make sure that we have specifically the wording that you have.
Okay.
You said discriminatory, economic, social, and then what did you say?
I said encourages ongoing education and opportunity for dialogue about childhood poverty.
That's already there.
Oh, comma.
And then the comma. Then you said discriminatory?
I said poverty, comma, hunger. So get rid of and, hunger, and discriminatory economic and social structures in Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion to amend. Is there a second? A second by Supervisor Anderson. Is there any discussion of the amendment? Supervisor Buchanan.
Yes, just in terms of how it was written out, I don't know if this is an editorial or it could be done later. Could we just make sure that the Oxford comma is in there?
Thank you very much, Supervisor Buchanan. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that's the comma that occurs before an and in a serial list of more than 2 items. Which happens to be one of my pet peeves. Thank you very much. Okay. We'll take that as an editorial observation. Supervisor Neiman.
Oh, I was just going to respond to the kids. That was an oversight. I missed that one reference to the kids. So the change has been made. That's
Okay.
it.
That's noted. Thank you. Any further comment on the amendment? Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand. Oh, sorry. I've been informed we can't vote, so we're going to do this by a voice vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. That's an easy count. Thank you. We're back to the main motion now. Is there any further discussion of the main motion as amended? Okay, we have to do this by voice. We will do this by voice vote also.
I can call it too if you want me to.
No, I don't think it's necessary. No one's called for a roll call vote. So all those in favor of the main motion as amended, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by nay. It's unanimous. That's an easy count also. Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 110.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Drammond.
Motion? Motion? Supervisor Dunning, second Supervisor Buchanan. Supervisor Gibson, will you be speaking to this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, this is to rezone 20.03 acres from AP agriculture preservation to A3 agriculture to allow the division of some wooded property from the agriculture land to allow construction of a single-family resident. With that being said, the remaining of that property will stay in agriculture. This was taken to the Town of Drammond's board, and they voted unanimous for approval. This was reviewed by our Planning Development Department, who looks at all the county codes and the comprehensive plans, both for the county and the township. And then we have a public hearing at our Planning Development Committee, and Planning Development Committee recommended approval also.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion, any questions or comments on this motion? I see none. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. File number 111.
Approving a bicycle pedestrian plan for Eau Claire County.
Motion. Supervisor Boerboom, second Supervisor Lavelle. Sorry. Supervisor Gibson, will you speak to this? Sorry, I'm losing track of my thinking here.
Okay, this plan coming forward here, because at a lot of this plan with the bicycle trails and stuff is also going to include the highway department. So at this point in time, I'd like to refer this back to the highway also for their review of this.
Okay. Do we have, is John Johnson here?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay. Hard to recognize him with that thick beard now. So, who is on the highway committee here? Okay. So Supervisor Henning, do you have a reaction comment to that request?
Yes, I do, and I think our highway commissioner has some facts that he would like to.
Mr. Johnson? Did he make a motion to refer? Okay, we have in front of us a subsidiary motion. It's the motion to refer from Supervisor Gibson, so that's what we're dealing with. Who's speaking to this?
I don't think I need to speak to that. Ray can speak to that. The highway committee would like to review.
That microphone is on.
It's on it or not. I think the question is the highway committee would like to review the plan prior to board action.
Okay.
That's what I've been informed.
I could do that too. I thought, in case you wanted more information. But our highway committee would like to have it referred back to us.
Okay. We have, before we go on, we have the motion to refer. We need a second, actually, to proceed. Second. Are you seconding Supervisor Leary? Thank you. I'm trying to recognize people. Are you also asking to be recognized to speak to it?
No, I just wanted to second the motion
Okay.
that I knew needed
Thank
to
you.
be seconded.
It is noted. So the motion to refer has been seconded. We have discussion. We have indication from the Director of the Highway Department, the Commissioner. Is there any further discussion of the motion to refer? All those in favor of the motion to refer, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed by nay. It is referred, and we can expect it back to County Board after that referral. We have no, I'm sorry, the next item is file number 104.
To amend section 2.90.070 of the code, destruction after request for inspection. To amend section 2.90.280 of the code, destruction pending litigation. And to amend section 2.90.285 of the code, microfilming or electric format storage of department records.
Motion, please. Supervisor Gatman. Second, Supervisor Neiman. I chair the Administration Committee, and our co-chair is not here tonight, so I'm going to ask the Corp Counsel to comment on this.
These changes are just an update to conform with the state statutes and things that have happened with the statutes.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or are there any questions regarding this motion? I see none. Supervisors, I assume you're prepared to vote. All those in favor of this motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Our agenda has been concluded, and therefore we are adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.